Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 4 o'clock news and politics show. 3 o'clock with the taste with Rick Simone was all things Rhode Island favorites. Be sure to check it out. But I'd like to welcome a familiar face. He's been here before, co-founder of MSNBC.com, Court TV, and GoLocal 24, board member and investor. Merrill Brown, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kate. Good afternoon.
I appreciate your Skyping in today because it's been yet another crazy week in the world of media, basically stemming from the video we saw making its rounds that Deadspin put together of Sinclair journalists reading a script about fake news and protecting our democracy. Let's just start off, Merrill, with your reaction when you saw this video that, again, I can't imagine anyone who's not seen it by now.
Well, my reaction was some shock, but not that much, some surprise, but not that much, and admiration for the Deadspin people who put it together so effectively. This is largely what Sinclair is all about. It's had different manifestations in the past. Shouldn't be that surprising, but it's a wake-up call to lots of people in the country about how important local TV news is and how the nationalization of it, whether it's ideological or not, is a big problem for our communities.
And so let's talk a little bit about that issue, that problem. You know, what does this create for media as a whole? Does it create even a natural distrust? Again, I spoke with another media, a political expert, Jennifer Lawless at American University, and she said, look, the script on its own sounds like someone saying, hey, we're going to protect you from fake news. But to hear everyone saying it, I mean, does it create a level of distrust that this was scripted in such a manner?
Well, it should. I don't know whether it actually does or not. It'd be interesting to do some survey research in Sinclair markets about how people are interpreting that. One important thing to keep in mind is the people reading those scripts are people who are deeply trusted in their communities, many of whom I'm sure have been in those anchor chairs for many years. These are people who cut ribbons at local hospitals, who talk at kids' schools, who are really part of their communities in very public and visible ways. They're recognized when they go to the grocery store. So I'm not quite so sure how people take to it who are regular viewers of those newscasts. It'd be interesting to see the research. Certainly the media community and the national media community has reacted, and hopefully there's some heat on Sinclair to rethink that approach.
And so what's your take on the reaction from Sinclair when this was made known earlier this week? They provided sort of a brief statement, if you will, but do you think that they'll alter their behavior, or do you think that they'll dig in their heels more?
I don't think the optics of this for advertisers are particularly favorable. After all, these are people who are still selling ads in their local communities, who will have some probably inevitable boycotting of this kind of thing. And the genesis of local television, the reason it's still as powerful a medium as it's been for many years, as opposed to declining power of other media, is that it connects with its communities. And so I would say the ideological part of all this is probably less important than the nationalizing of local news. And if these folks aren't covering their communities anymore, I think their ratings are going to be undermined, and I think their advertising base is going to be at risk. So that's the bottom line for Sinclair and everybody else. And ironically, that's not too different an argument that we're all having about Laura Ingraham these days, and whether advertisers have the clout to really encourage broadcasters and cablecasters, for that matter, to make programming changes.
Were you surprised to see that reaction to Laura Ingraham this week when David Hogg had pressed the issue and the advertisers seemingly stepped up?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, the Parkland situation is sadly, in many ways, apple pie. And the students at Parkland and those who are sharing their cause are the future of this country. They are diverse and a very eclectic group of students, and yet they represent the heartland in many ways. And Laura had to apologize for that. And the trashing of young people interested in civic good is unacceptable, and it's wonderful, but not shocking that national advertisers would pay attention to that.
And so let's tack back to Sinclair again. Let's talk a little bit about that script. You know, we have a dominant media company, you know, parroting basically the media agenda of the president himself. Is this uncharted territory? Does it seem like Trump TV?
It does seem like Trump TV. I mean, even use of the phrase "fake news," which Trump claims having invented it. That's a highly questionable proposition. But even fake news is it's so ironic that we're having that using that vernacular in discussion of fake news because you and I would certainly agree that the 2016 campaign was characterized by lots of fake news via bots in Russia and so on and so forth, and that in fact is fake news. The president has called legitimate news, as it's carried on cable television, broadcast television, and in our large national newspapers, as fake news. And so he's taken a really legitimate and important debate
Mm.
about social media and about responsible journalism and about bots and the manipulation of everything we do these days and attempted to own it. And we have to reclaim that. And I think many in the media business are reclaiming that. And we see headlines just within the past hour or two about the magnitude of what Cambridge Analytica did with personal data. And a lot of that is shipping fake news onto people's Facebook pages. It's now 87 million people who
Yes.
are affected by that, which is a story that just broke in the last couple of hours. And we have to get this debate right because the legitimacy of facts and the importance of news and information in a civic society is something we all have to rally around, and more people are.
And you raise a great point, and it has come up under the administration too, the utilization of fake news to basically put that label on anything that someone disagrees with when in fact it might be legitimate news, but you just disagree with the premise of the argument. As you said, can we reclaim that? And is it a concerted effort amongst media and journalists to do so?
Media journalists and journalists, educators, responsible government officials, writers of various kinds on various topics. Yes, it is really important that we not sit on our hands about this and just simply think, well, the President of the United States is here for no more than 8 years. This phenomenon will pass. No, because it's having an impact in the survey research we see about the public's perception of the information around them. And if you look at that data, some of it is quite startling. People not accepting things that are given facts, people not understanding what the State Department does versus what the National Security Agency does. There's so many components of this, and we've got to get it right. And I keep using the word civics. Civics is really important in our society, and you and I know it's being taught inadequately in many contexts. And so this is further undermining the public's understanding of what their government really does. And it's their government and it's their civic society. And we've got to, as a society, stand up for those values.
You raise an interesting point because clearly it possibly could be again broached in education K through 12 or college or further. But what to the folks out of the education realm who aren't in a school-based setting? I mean, can you re-educate people, simply through again news journalism and social media?
I think you can, and there are people trying to do that. In fact, the social media companies, Facebook and Google in particular, are attempting through investing in starting new organizations to clarify this debate and to provide new forums for it. There's also a field that's talked about a lot and not in front of enough people called media literacy. And those of us who have taught media and people like you, Kate, who are well read about these things, recognize that that is a subject that needs to be taught in our schools. We have to teach students how to sort through the nonsense and get to the real facts. And historically, it hasn't really been a problem. For better or for worse, there was a monopoly news situation in our society for many years, a world dominated by a few large publications generally and a small number of broadcasters who controlled the pipe into your house. The good news is nobody controls the pipe anymore, but that means that anybody can filter through that pipe and get to you and get to our kids. So we have to learn as a society and teach our children quite clearly how to sort through it all and become active media consumers and not simply recipients of people's feeds.
And do you think that we will see, again, that what media was intended to be in the first place, obviously unbiased viewpoints and not editorialized, with both Sinclair now looking to take over Tribune and where things are at in the country, again, are we going to see it more polarized, or will we see an emergence? Will there be a recognition and need for that truly, again, unadulterated, unbiased journalism?
Well, GoLocal is doing that. Many local startups are doing that. There are many national publications, both for profit and not for profit, that are attempting to reclaim some of that territory. I would argue that the big national newspapers, for the most part, are unbiased. Bias isn't so terrible if journalistic values are part of that bias. Look, we've read both conservative and liberal publications for many years: the New Republic, the Nation magazine, the National Review. They conduct journalism, they operate fairly, but they have a point of view, yet they verify facts. So, transparent biases and those that are upheld by journalistic values are part of how we've talked about issues for many, many years. And that's not the problem. The problem is, outright fabrication of things. And both our leaders, such as President Trump, and others lying and distorting facts that is really the problem.
And let's, while we have you here, Meryl, talk a little bit about the Facebook conundrum at the moment. We saw last week the FTC say that they're investigating, once again, Facebook, because let's not forget, back in 2011, Facebook had a settlement with the FTC as well. Will we see any substantive changes after the Cambridge Analytica fallout? And they've said they've started to. There's supposedly more transparency for the average Facebook user to have control and over their privacy functions. Do you think that this will actually affect change at Facebook?
I absolutely do. I think they are quite incented in this regard. The last thing they need is year after year of government investigation of all this. We're approaching an off-year election in November, just 5 months away, 6 months away, which is going to be very, very important. And Facebook is a trusted distributor of news and information, even though they're not a creator of it. So yes, I'm fairly hopeful. Facebook recognized a year or so ago that they needed to invest and devote more of their fundamentally unlimited resources to dealing with this problem and dealing with journalists. And for the first time in the last year or so, they've actually hired journalists and media people to be a part of the vetting process and of the distribution process of the content they handle. So I'm optimistic, largely because they have the resources and incentive to do something about it. What we're both, I'm sure, less optimistic about is the return of local news and information generally under a strained business model. Facebook doesn't have those strains.
And let's talk a little bit too. Again, they are so big; they are the behemoth. You know, will we see them? Is there a monopoly issue here that will ever be addressed? Again, we keep talking about regulatory, but again, they're kind of the big game. Is there an issue of them being the only player, the biggest player in the room?
Well, it depends how they behave. I mean, I don't think it can be said that Facebook has demonstrated monopolistic tendencies. It's generally a pretty open platform. It's, in fact, too open and open to manipulation. They may have other legal kinds of concerns, and they're going to be regulated in ways they haven't been because of the complexity of the platform they sit on. But no, I don't think there are antitrust issues that are going to surface about Facebook. I think we may be on the verge of seeing some important antitrust issues raised about Amazon, but that's a whole other matter.
That's for a whole other conversation. Well, it's been a wild couple of weeks in the media realm between Facebook and what we've seen from Sinclair. Anything else you want to share with viewers while we have you in here, Meryl? Again, what we've seen in just these past 2 weeks alone.
Well, I mentioned Amazon and the current discussion led by the White House about Amazon and its founder, Jeff Bezos, owner of the Washington Post, is just interesting, but also very, very disturbing. The idea that the behavior of Amazon would receive scrutiny because its founder owns a daily newspaper is appalling and merits significant outrage. It would be like, my suggesting go local isn't fair and therefore we should be investigating your stock portfolio, Kate. It makes absolutely no sense. And it's frightening because it's the weight of the presidency weighing into an issue that in which he could really make a big difference in ways that are horrifying. Amazon is a big company. It merits scrutiny. It now owns Whole Foods. It now dominates our commerce. It dominates the cloud, the way we all share information. It's a big, important issue how Amazon behaves. But how the Washington Post behaves is an independent issue of all of that, except for how they cover Amazon. And we have to be very sensitive to that. And I know the Washington Post management is. But what the president has said in the last few days about Amazon really should raise eyebrows among all of us. So that's the thing of the last couple of days that's really got me quite concerned about where we're headed in terms of government power.
Well, I'm sure we'll continue to keep an eye on that and developments with what the president says as it pertains to Amazon. But I'm glad we had the chance to pick your brain both on Facebook and Sinclair. Merrill Brown, appreciate your taking the time to Skype in today.
Thanks, Kate.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Merrill Brown, co-founder of MSNBC Court TV, GoLocal 24 investor and board member. Always appreciate picking his brain on all things media and politics. Merrill, thanks. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with our next guest in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Very happy to welcome my next guest here into the studio, Rich Ehrenberg, visiting lecturer in political science and public policy at Brown University. Has spent 34 years in senior staff positions from George Mitchell to Carl Levin to Paul Tsongas. Was part of a forum this afternoon at the Watson Institute. This was Broken. Can the Senate save itself and the country? This is based on the title of Ira Shapiro's book.
Right.
Who was at the forum today. Is the Senate broken, and how can it be fixed?
Well, I think the Senate is almost certainly broken. I think everyone recognizes that it's been dysfunctional, and this has been a long slide. In my view, starting in about 1980, and year over year over year, it has been functioning less and less well, and the crux of the problem is that the parties in the Senate are now so polarized, so far apart, that they don't very frequently come to the table, and democracy demands that.
And you say democracy demands it. Let's talk a little bit about the discussion that took place. I know Brown professor Wendy Schiller was there as well. Yes. Do we see this changing anytime soon? Is it up to the electorate to listen to candidates who say, look, the polarization is not serving the country, but as we see the party machines in there and the money behind it, is there any chance to rectify this at any time soon in the near future?
I think it's tough in the short term. However, you know, I say a big part of the problem is just plain old bad behavior by senators themselves. And most of them know better, and they, you know, the potential is there. In the Senate, the lines of communication are always open because it's a small body. And because of the filibuster, I wrote a book about the filibuster, because of the filibuster, in order to run the Senate, the majority has to deal with the minority in order to keep the place going. And so when we do get to these crisis points, such as, you know, we have these government shutdowns or fiscal cliff or whatever it may be, when there's a deadline, you'll notice that the cradle of the compromise is almost always the Senate. And that's because even though things are pretty toxic, things are pretty bad, the lines of communication are still open.
And so you talk about the sort of bad behavior, if you will. Are members just incentivized to both, I don't want to say pander, if you will, but tack to the media and tack to their base? Is there just no incentive to be that honest broker, that middleman, if you will, to say, look, this is, if we're going to get anything done, does it make, is it more advantageous for them, again, to go into their corners than get into the ring?
Yeah, there's not much middle ground anymore. I mean, you know, from right here in Rhode Island, and back in the day of John Chafee, you know, a moderate Republican and a moderate Democrat working together could build a majority from the middle out. And that was quite a common thing in the Senate. But you can't do that today. In fact, most Republicans don't want their picture taken with a Democratic colleague because that's dangerous back home. You know.
We have a very interesting Republican Senate primary here. We have a member of the House who is running very far to the right. We also have a former Supreme Court member, Bob Flanders, here, who said, look, I take money from the Democrats and I take money from Republicans. He's not been in the political realm, but is running. It'll be interesting to see if he emerges from the primary.
It's an interesting form of bipartisanship to talk about taking money from both sides.
So talk with us a little bit, again, the forum took place today. Talk with us a little bit about the discussion. Again, Ira Shapiro was there talking about the book. But talk, you know, what should folks be interested to know that were some of the more salient points that took place up at Brown today?
Yeah, well, I think, unfortunately, I think we hung a lot of crepe. I mean, it unfortunately, you know, there was a lot of agreement on the panel that the Senate, you know, has been on this decline, and in his book, Ira talks about what he called the Great Senate in his first book, and in this most recent one, he calls the Mansfield Senate, and you know, talks about what a great leader Mike Mansfield was. But the point I come back to is what's made the Senate great is the supermajority requirement. So keeping the filibuster is fundamental, and as you may have noted, President Trump, you know, works overtime, you know, trying to trash it. I don't believe he really understands what the filibuster is all about. To him, it's, you know, the so-called nuclear option is a switch. You know, there's a choice. You need 60 votes or you need 51, and he looks at it and says, well, that's a no-brainer. I want 51. So he just wants the Senate to get out of his way. That's not the Senate's role. That's not what the framers had in mind.
And talk with us about this administration. I'm sure it came up in conversation during the forum today. Again, the way that Congress works with this current presidency. Have you seen anything like this in recent history?
No. The short answer is no. I think we're wearing out the word unprecedented because it seems virtually every day the president does something that's unprecedented. And one of the great disappointments to me, when I was on the Hill, lifers like me, in the vernacular we refer to us as Hill rats. And, but I'm someone who loves the institution. I care about the Senate. And one of the great disappointments so far of this administration has been the failure of basically anyone in the Republican caucus to stand up and show some independence. I mean, many of them I know are appalled by this president's behavior. However, they're worried about their base. They're worried his base is so rock solid and it's a part of their base, and they're afraid to cross him. But that's not what we expect from great senators. We expect them to stand up. I mean, John McCain did, but unfortunately, he's quite ill and he's not in Washington. And the only two senators that have criticized Trump are Bob Corker and Flake, and both of them are on their way out the door.
Yes, indeed. So let's look ahead to midterms 2018. What do you expect?
Well, I expect a big blue wave, as they say. I don't say that as a partisan. I just think it's the reality. We're seeing it in the special elections. Now, the House is so severely gerrymandered, and when you talk about the House, that's where you start when you talk about dysfunction. So, you know, it can absorb a pretty big blue wave and remain in the hands of the Republicans. So I think at the end of the day, I think the margin will be tight one way or the other, and the Democrats may take over the House. In the Senate, it's a tall order. Again, many of the, you know, the wind will be at the Democrats' back, but it just the unfortunate map that they have to deal with this time around. Of course, only 1/3 of the Senate runs every 2 years, and it just happens right now that a lot of Democratic senators running for re-election are running in states that Trump carried, basically red states. And so it's going to be very difficult to overtake the Republicans in the Senate. But there's a chance to do it, and it could happen. It could happen in both houses.
So we're keeping an eye on 18. We're keeping an eye on the midterms, and I did start off sort of asking about the broken Senate. And again, just to sort of encapsulate the conversation both today at Watson and your thoughts in general, moderates, do they stand a chance?
Well, I mean, there are fewer and fewer moderates in the Congress, and we see that. We see them resigning, retiring in large numbers every time, every cycle, and they generally replaced by a Democrat further to the left or a Republican further to the right, and the polarization that we observe gets worse and worse. And many of those that don't leave have trouble in the elections. I mean, we saw it in Rhode Island. I mean, I think Senator Whitehouse is a great senator, but in his race against Chafee, he was able to make the argument that, look, you know, vote for a real Democrat, not Democratic light. You know? And so moderates run into that all the time.
They do. That was, again, back in 06. So talk with us a little bit about your time at Brown and your involvement in Watson. You know, is it everything you'd expected?
I love Brown. Now, I often say I miss Capitol Hill every single day. It's in your blood. We call it Potomac fever. But I've been at Brown for 9 years now. I teach both public policy and in the political science department. I'm teaching 3 courses this semester. You know, I've taught a total of 9 courses over those years, 9 different courses.
Wow.
And you know, I just love Brown. And you know, when you talk about what do you see that's positive for the future, I look out at those students every day, and they're engaged, they're interested, they're, you know, waiting to get involved, and many of them are headed towards politics and public policy and so forth. So that's very hopeful.
Well, you provided almost a perfect segue to our next guest here. We have a Brown student, Tristan Hood, who is an armed services veteran, talking about an effort that Brown students and RISD students are partnering with to help female veterans here in Rhode Island. But I appreciate your taking the time to come into the studio here. Rich Ehrenberg, again, on the panel today, Broken, Can the Senate Save Itself and the Country? Appreciate your breaking down a little bit of that talk and coming downtown to see us. Thanks so much. We'll let you go around the corner and we'll welcome our next guest in.
Great.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome my next guest here in the studio. He's been with us before, Tristan Hood. Thank you for returning to GoLocal.
Yeah, absolutely.
To give us the vantage point of a veteran at Brown University and an effort underway that Brown students are pairing up with RISD students to help female veterans returning back to Rhode Island. Tell us what's going on this month.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a couple weekends, we'll be hosting a fundraising event at Brown for Brown RISD students. And the purpose of the event is to give a bunch of students like a chance to get out in the spring, and hopefully the weather comes through for us. So that's a big part of it. But the primary purpose of it is a fundraiser that we're doing for the Corporal Holly Charette Home in Johnston, Rhode Island, which at the current moment is the only transitional house for homeless female veterans in Rhode Island. It's overseen by Operation Stand Down Rhode Island. It's a wonderful program, a wonderful group of people, and like we spoke about earlier, that's all. We have a GoFundMe page up, and that's where all of the funds are going to go. We're going to try to help out the Holly Home, and you know, this is just one more way that the Brown student veterans give back to our community.
Fantastic. And talk with us about partnering up with RISD. Has this been a partnership that's been in existence before, or is this something new?
This is something new. We have a couple contacts down there, and it's more actually just to involve our network, kind of like incorporate. Brown constantly does like student events, like I said, with RISD, and it's more to use this as an opportunity for us to get to know our partners. This is also a chance for the veterans to get to know the other people on Brown's campus. We will be hosting it with a Greek house on campus, and we've been using them as well. This is how we can kind of like all meet each other. And again, it's going to be an outdoor thing, so I don't know who, weather-wise, would not want to be there. So
now, it is just open to the students, but again, this GoFundMe page and helping the Holly Home, you've been hearing from people around the region, around the country on this.
Yeah, actually, we've been around the country. Once we were able to get the GoFundMe up, unfortunately, it is only for Brown RISD students. But the way we can incorporate more people, because like you know, we've worked in the past with like the Rhode Island Blue Star Moms. We've worked with a couple other organizations, and then the best way that we figured out that we could incorporate our community was either through the GoFundMe or having direct donation items such as like socks and gas cards and stuff like that. But we've gotten donations in from California, from Louisiana, like, you know, it's coming in from all over. And then again, the main goal for me, one of the things that veterans constantly are concerned with is veteran homelessness, which is an unfortunate thing, and it affects a lot more people than we would imagine. And the truth is it's very difficult to understand like why a veteran became homeless. And so if anything we can do to help and give back, that's what we're trying to do.
So raising awareness, raising funds, again, partnering Brown and RISD for this event coming up. The last time we had spoken with you, it seems hard to believe because I see you on social media all the time, was following the incident at Brown University where a student was caught on tape basically removing flags, and this was before Veterans Day. What's the state of veterans and veteran involvement and Brown involvement in Veterans Affairs right now?
I think I was just talking with one of your colleagues in the back. I think we've come a long way since a couple years ago, let alone the administrative changes that have occurred inside of the application process for veterans coming to Brown, including on-campus space for veterans, like a lounge and an office. Most of our students are commuting. They have families, so they don't live on or near campus. Mm-hmm. But as far as like the event, I don't know if I could have done this event a few years ago.
Really?
But like I said, we have the campus's support. We have student organization support. And we're in a really great spot. The veteran population at Brown is growing. It's very small, so if you're a veteran and you're considering Brown, I'll plug it, like try applying. And so this is, you know, this is the first student event we've ever held. We've done the Veterans Day ceremony in the past. We've worked with the State House and a couple other places, but this will be the first student get-together that we've ever hosted. So this is kind of a big deal, and it's just one more step forward progressively as we, you know, move forward.
Well, fantastic. It sounds like things have, in fact, come a long way. And speaking of coming a long way yourself, we talked last time about what might be next for you. You had an internship in Washington, D.C. with Senator Jack Reed. Have you got the political bug? Is that what's next after Brown?
I'll be honest, I think everybody has the political bug right now. I think if Facebook's any indicator of who's out there, I think everybody has a political bug. I will say my time in Washington, my short time in Washington with Senator Reed was one of the most impressive experiences I've ever seen. It's one thing to watch, you know, pundits and see the news talk about what's going on in Washington, but this was the first time I had a chance to like hands-on experience it, and I don't know if I could have asked for anybody better to work for other than Senator Reid. It was one of the greatest experiences. I intend to return there one day, but I need to do a little bit more work, and so my next step is in law school, and I've been accepted to a few places right now, but I'm still holding out to hear from a few others.
Congratulations. Okay, law school next, looking potentially at politics, but an update on what's taking place at Brown University. Again, an event for students, but this is for the Holly Home, and people who are interested can donate to support. But again, raising awareness for homeless veteran issues in this home, addressing the needs of female veterans as well. So how much more school? You must be almost done.
I'm done. May 27th. That's I think May 27th is the commencement. And then it's on to the next chapter. It's on to the next adventure. So it's been a great run up here.
Well, I appreciate, we had you again in before talking about Brown University. To have you back to see where things have gone to at this point, again, having the student event with RISD, I want to commend you for your work up at Brown. Wish you well in your next endeavors. Hopefully we will talk with you as you move on in the professional realm. We'll have more information. We'll have that GoFundMe page up. You can see about that event. You got to be a RISD or a Brown student, sorry, or maybe just sneak in if you look like one. But again, we'll give you this information about what Brown and RISD students are up to, again, to help veterans here in the state. So, Tristan Hood, I appreciate you taking the time to
thank you so
come
much.
down the hill. I'm sure you've got stuff to do back up at school.
Yeah, always.
So I'll let you go around the corner. And that just about wraps up another day here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. 3 o'clock was Rick Simone with The Taste with Rhode Island favorites. Be sure to check it out if you didn't have a chance to. Merrill Brown joined us kicking off the 4 o'clock hour. And then again, Rich Ehrenberg with Brown University talking about the forum taking place at the Watson Institute this afternoon. So thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you 3 o'clock at the State House tomorrow, 4 o'clock back here in the studio. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.